Time for the Tesla and Palantir weekly update. Also going to include a few other charts as well, so stay tuned for that. But starting with Tesla here, we're going to first look at monthly candles because Friday was the monthly candle close. And what really happened was Tesla still maintained that 429.84. So essentially, since it broke out back in September 2025, it has basically been stabilizing on top of that 429.84 zone while continuously closing weekly and monthly candles above it the majority of the time. Even the weekly candles, the majority of the time. Only a few candles back in November closed below it. So I think that's a good target to try to focus on going forward in the month of February as well. So we're going to pay attention to the same exact zone, 429 up to 457. It's not going to have any chance of breaking to all-time highs until that 457.27 breaks as resistance. So we're going to keep watching that. And I know there's a lot of scary stuff developing over the weekend. So is price really going to stabilize on top of that 429, or is it going to dip a little bit lower? Well, just like last couple of months, right? It's been getting liquidity lower and then closing higher. And since it is the beginning of the month, sure, it could open lower and maybe even go back down to the low 400s again, 406, and then maybe by the end of the month, continue to start closing candles again back above that 429.84. So I wouldn't really worry about the beginning of the month shenanigans because they always do it, right? In the beginning of the month, they always like to manipulate the market and make fear out of some kind of narrative, and that seems to be the case all the time. So they open the candles maybe in the 420s or a little bit lower. Who knows? Maybe it goes back down to the low 400s, but I think February still can have a solid monthly candle close. And I think what we're waiting on really is if we put on the Ichimoku cloud here, the conversion line is still way down here on the monthly chart, right? So that's at 384.92. I think we're just waiting for it to slowly catch up to price over time. So no matter what, I think we're going to be consolidating underneath this 457 for some time, maybe even a few more months or so before it goes into all-time highs. And on the weekly chart, it kind of says the same thing as well, because the baseline is still catching up to price, and we've already started to close candles underneath this conversion line here as well, which is at 456, exactly where that 457 zone is. So we have confluence of resistance. We have a lot of confluence of support at 429, even to the low 400s. There's a lot of support down there, so I would just let it be, right? Let it consolidate, let it go sideways, let it just go in this range. But technically speaking, when you look at the monthly candles again, everything above 400 is beautiful, right? Everything above. Like, look at this 406 zone, right? Before, never closed any monthly candles above it all of 2025 or before. Now in late 2025 in September, it broke out and has never closed any monthly candles below that 406. So a very healthy chart, and you get the best perspective by looking at this monthly candles, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs. It's a previous resistance zone, everything above the 400s that is currently flipping to support. So I would not fear lower at this point, and I would take it. I think low 400s would be a great opportunity for more accumulation if it came. But ultimately, this 429.84 is kind of proving that that is a magnet for price. So even if it does go a little bit lower, I think it's going to gravitate back towards it until it's ready to break this 457. So yeah, basically everything that you see from 457 to the low 400s, this is its current range. The monthly candles says it's the current range. Why? Because you can see the past 5 months in a row, it's just been stabilizing in that zone. Can't close any monthly candles above it, but also does not close any candles below that 406. So this is very bullish for continuation once it's finished its consolidation mode, but I think it's still going to take maybe more weeks, maybe even a few more months before we see all-time highs. So very, very bullish, but it's really explosive already, so it needs a little bit more time to cool off before we see the 500s again. And next we got Palantir. So Palantir, we're going to start off with the log-based fibs again. The 157.62 is that 1.618 fib, and it closed below, right? It actually closed below for the first time since last year, since November of last year, and we have seen it a couple of times before. So is it the end of the world? Well, it's going to mean a loss of momentum. That's what it's going to mean. So ultimately, we do have to pay attention to it, and if 157.62 remains resistance, then there is a chance for a longer and maybe deeper consolidation. And even more confluence, switching it to linear scale, we can see it also closed its very first monthly and weekly candle, right? Even go to the monthly candles here. Yeah, it closed a monthly candle underneath there too. right? First weekly and monthly candle underneath that 147.31 as well. So this is more indication that this is probably in for a longer consolidation period now, and we're not going to see 200s just yet. We're going to spend more time in this zone. We're going to spend more time in the 140s, maybe even lower. And the reason why I say lower is because we also have to put on the confluence of our Ichimoku and our moving averages, and we're going to go back to log scale here just to pay attention to what we really see, right? We also see that price close below the 50-week moving average for the first time in a couple of years, right? It broke out back in May 2023, and it actually closed below that too. So it's more signs of loss of momentum. But one thing is for sure is this chart still in the past couple of years has not even touched the cloud. So that is going to be a likely scenario at a minimum, right? And that cloud next week is around 143, 142. So we're probably going to see that and maybe even go deeper into the cloud, possibly in the 130s. And what is the most likely situation right now, in my opinion? As long as 157.62 remains resistance, we're probably going to see a backtest of at least this previous resistance zone, and that's maybe 125. And that's kind of somewhere inside the weekly Ichimoku cloud, and that's perfectly acceptable because huge explosive move, long consolidation, and as long as this 157.62 doesn't, as long as this holds as resistance, I should say, there is a great potential of going into the cloud just for many, many weeks, maybe even months before we see the continuation back to the 200s. Is this a broken stock? Is this something that is going to go collapse down to the 90s and the 70s and all that stuff below? I don't think so. I think a normal backtest of previous resistance zone in the 125, maybe won't even get that low. Maybe 130 or so would be that zone because there is a lot of demand here right in the 130s, right? We see it did consolidate here with mini candles before it really broke out. So backtesting that whole 130, even 125 zone would make sense at this point because we got confirmation, right? I always wait for confirmation that the way candles close, that's probably the direction things are going to go. And closing below the 157, closing below the 50-week moving average, 146, closing below the linear scale, 147.31, means a cloud backtest is coming, right? It's going to come, and it's probably going to be going somewhat deeper into the cloud, and I'm thinking mid-120s is the likely target at this point. So is it bearish? Short term, maybe, right? But macro level, macro trend still is very intact. And we're going to switch to monthly candles just to show you this trend too, how it also closed below the 156.42 monthly conversion line. So that's even more confluence of wanting to retest lower. So I think we're just waiting for averages now to catch up to price, right? Maybe try to wait for this baseline to kind of catch up to price a little bit. Maybe it can in the 120s or so. So we're going to see also how far away it is from the monthly cloud over here. So we could see, honestly, price just battling support, resistance, doing all this before it's ready to break out again. And we could see maybe a liquidity grab below as well at one point, maybe below this previous resistance zone too as well. So is this bearish? No, this is a normal consolidation waiting for a lot of these averages to catch up to price. And since we did lose some support on multiple time frames, monthly chart, weekly chart, right, daily chart, we lost support on all of them. So we have to consider more and longer consolidation. It doesn't mean it needs to collapse, but it does mean it's going to consolidate. And the most likely scenario is going back in the weekly cloud right here, just trying to find stability for weeks to come before going higher. So this is going to be a game of patience now before all-time highs. But I still think all-time highs are coming in the future after this longer consolidation happens. And we can see the 100-week moving average is still at 95. The 200-week is still at 53. This is just proving how explosive this chart has been. So this long consolidation period is going to help these moving averages catch up to price, which is going to be a necessary process for it to go back to the 200s and above. So I'm not too nervous about price here. I think it's going to be okay. I think we just need to be patient now because we got our confirmation that we're not ready to break out to all-time highs just yet. We need to go touch the cloud, get inside the cloud, stabilize for a few weeks, few months before the next impulse move higher. And next, we're going to do Coinbase. And Coinbase, there's a lot of fear out there in crypto right now. There's a lot of fear with Coinbase right now. But Coinbase is still in process of trying to find its higher low from back in April of last year. That's all it has been doing for the past few months. And yes, it's been in a downtrend for a few months now. But ultimately, that's what it takes sometimes with volatile stocks. It takes a while to find a new higher low. And that's what price has been doing forever. Higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. And yes, somewhere in this vicinity is going to be a higher low. And now that we did close a weekly candle below this 197.27, that is even more confirmation that we're probably going to go a little bit deeper into this zone, right? So it didn't want to stop around 245. It didn't want to stop around 197. So now where is it more likely to stop? Well, we can put on linear scale and just take a look at the confluence here of the 382 fib. And the 382 fib does coincide with the previous resistance zone right over here. And it does coincide with all of this previous support that was lost before the final capitulation moments of the bear market. So retesting that at this point would make sense. And as long as this log scale 197.27 remains resistance, I think the likely next support zone is going to be this 183.58. So we do have to prepare for lower. We can also put on the moving averages as well, just to take a look that the 200-week moving average is still down there at 169.05. It is upward sloping now, which is good, right? And an upward sloping 200 SMA is a good bullish trend, right? So we do want to see that continue, but doesn't need to go back and touch it. I mean, we'll watch how price reacts at this 183.58. I'm always about confirmation. I'm always about seeing if price can truly stabilize. And once we get confirmation that candles close below levels, like it did with that 197, then that does indicate lower. So we can pay attention to 183, and maybe worst case scenario is this 200-week moving average at 169. And that's simply because that was the bottom of April and March of last year, right? It did do a huge breakout, huge backtest directly through the 200-week moving average, and then that was the bottom. So we're getting close, right? We're getting close to max fear, max pain, and people wanting to capitulate. But when that really happens, it's usually a sign of the bottom. So with the way crypto's behaving this weekend, it is probably going to open up lower, probably closer to the 183, if not around it. And it might even want to touch that 169. But ultimately, the risk reward, the lower it goes, is more in your favor than it was up here, right? And everybody likes to criticize and say, oh, I was bullish up here. Yes, I was bullish here, but I was also bullish back in April. I was also bullish back in September 2024. I was bullish back here as well. I've been bullish because the macro trend has been bullish, right? I don't trade in and out. I trade the trends. And the trend is your friend still with higher highs and higher lows. So I'm not afraid of this. And I will be continuing to build a position in Coinbase next week, because the lower it goes, the better I like it, right? I can buy more shares with less money to get the appreciation to the upside. So if and when it's ready for all-time highs, I'll be ready to capitalize on that. And next I want to talk about MicroStrategy. And on log scale here, we've seen this be in a downtrend ever since basically 2000 and what was it, like 2025, like July and June, right? It's been in a downtrend ever since then. And we finally hit a milestone last week. It finally pierced through the 200-week moving average, and that was the first test going back from when it broke out back in October of 2023. So that is the first step to trying to find a bottom here now. Since it broke below this 244 zone back in November, that gave us confirmation that it's ready to head lower, and sure enough, it's heading lower down towards this 200. It did hold it as support, but with the way crypto is behaving this weekend, it might want to go a little bit deeper, and I'm going to show you why, basically only using a GAN and these fibs. So we're going to go put on our GAN square. We're going to take off the moving averages just real quick, and I'm actually going to take out the fibs real quick too, just to show you the symmetry of my GAN square. So this has been a very beautiful chart, right? We've been watching this one for a while, and it tried to flip the top arc to a support, and then it flipped it to resistance with confirmation right here at 360. That was confirmation that I wanted to go lower, and then it tried to hold the bottom arc at 266, and it failed. So if it wants a true back test of market symmetry, it's not going to be until 128 or 125, depending on that zone. So even though the 200-week moving average held as support, I like to go off of market symmetry, and market symmetry is beautiful because it's also a previous resistance over here flipping to a support, and that coincides with the fib too, right? That's the fib from the last high. That's the one level, the 131.50 down to the 128. So if we're looking for true support, it's going to be right down here in this zone, maybe getting some liquidity below it into the 120s, the low 120s before it wants to go higher. But These are, in my opinion, the beginning stages of finding a bottom. Previous resistance, breakout, rejection right here. It even got rejected exactly at the 1.618 right here. Exactly there. I took a lot of profits up there too when it happened, and I was on the live stream with the tracker when that did happen. So this is when you take profits. This is when you want to be cautious. You don't want to be cautious closer to a demand zone. This is a demand zone now. We see so many candles down here as a previous resistance now flipping to a support. So we're in the zone, right? The 140s down to the 120s. We're in that zone. I would prefer a touch of market symmetry down there at 128 at least, but who knows if it's going to get it. It's in the zone. But with the weakness with crypto this weekend, I think it's a very good possibility of going back down there for a back test. But this chart is showing me that perhaps crypto, Bitcoin, MSTR is closer to a bottom than anything else. So I don't like to panic in demand zones. I don't like to do it, right? And I see a lot of demand zones in crypto as well. So I'm not going to be panicking in that zone. I think this is a good setup for a bottoming process. Finally, I know I tried to call some bottoms up here, right? But we got confirmation. I'm always about confirmation, right? Once it closed below that 245 with a weekly candle back in November 3rd, right here, closed below, flipped to 2 resistance. That was confirmation that it's not ready to be a bottom, right? This is what it's all about. So a lot of people like to criticize, but I wait for confirmation, and we've gotten so much confirmation that there is no bottom. But based off of market symmetry alone, this chart makes sense that it wants to go a little bit lower first before the bottom truly happens. So I'm becoming more and more bullish with MSTR. I'm becoming more and more bullish with Bitcoin and Ethereum the lower they go. And it just looks like it's almost ready, right? A little bit more pain, though. A little bit more pain before the gain. And speaking of a little bit more pain before the gain, we're going to do Bitcoin here. And I'm going to show you this because what happened with a monthly candle close yesterday, right? It actually closed a first monthly candle below this 82,226. And these fibs are basically the more recent ones from 2024 of March down to the April 2024 bottom. And it's been holding these fibs for a while. And I like these fibs a lot because it went straight up to the 2.272. That was resistance. That was the top, the recent top, right? So it came back down. It's been holding these fib levels too, especially the blue ones, the 1.272 and the 1.414. It's been holding that forever, right? Since last year, early last year, it's been support, but it lost it. It lost it. So this is kind of proving to me that it's not ready, and more proof to me that maybe a little bit more pain before any gain. And this 73,794 is a perfect place to go, at least for a back test again before higher. So I think as long as 82,200 remains resistance, we're going to have a battle, and the battle might prove that it needs more liquidity lower first before higher. I do actually have more confluence going back to the weekly chart as well with this chart, and I want to show you some more confluence of 73,000. And not many people watch this fib, but I want to show it to you. I want to show it to you right here. It is the cycle top of 2017 and the cycle bottom of 2015, 2014, right? This is the fib, and I want to show this because this is a very interesting fib where it respects a lot of levels, right? Even that 886, it respected that as resistance for a while before it shot off to all-time highs, right? That 11,300, that was a battle for a very long time before it blasted off. And then it came back and back tested that 19,000 zone for a while. That was basically the end of the bear market, right? Back testing that zone, end of the bear market, previous high over here. Well, we're kind of doing the same thing where the bear market could be coming to an end with the capitulation event going through that 73,000. And if it's anything like 2022, it could flush through it for a few weeks, that fib, right? So if it could flush through it a few weeks and maybe go to like to the high 60s in that zone before higher. So a lot of people are calling for like 50,000, 40,000. Well, if we use these fibs, we can really see what happened from the 2017 top. It was a breakout back test of that top. Well, now we have the 2024 top. It's a breakout back test of the 2024 top. So this really has a great potential to hold, but we're not there yet, right? We're not there yet at all. So 1.272 fib, 73,762, I think at least has to get touched now before a continuation higher. And once we break above that 82,000 zone, then we'll be ready to continue that uptrend, right? Remember that 82,000 zone right here from this fib right there, right? We got the 82,226. That is the zone to break above for bullish continuation. So in the meantime, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be stuck in a range. And since we have never successfully backtested this 73,762 at all, I think that's the likelihood. And even just like last time, maybe a final capitulation event through this fib right here before the continuation higher. So I'm more and more optimistic. And the reason why I'm not bearish on Bitcoin is because the market structure from the 2022 bottom is still macro bullish. And why? Because it's higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher high. And guess what? This is still a higher low from before back in April of 2025. So I cannot be bearish on something when it's macro bullish still in an uptrend, right? And this has the chance to go to the 147 above and even higher once this little mini bear market that we're seeing is over. I don't think it's ready to go higher yet, but I do think we can start to find stability in the low 70s, get a little bit liquidity, maybe even the high 60s before the continuation higher. So this chart to me just looks like MSTR. They're trying to bottom now. They're trying to go back to some important levels. And this is a very important zone. There's a lot of confluence in that 73,762. So a little bit more patience, a little bit more pain, but I think give it a few months or so, it'll be ready to go back towards all-time highs.